Hi, I'm Dana Brooks, and welcome back to another episode of the Empower Hour brought to you by the Empower Plant from Basic Brooks. We're very excited to have two guests, our first empowered men that we have ever had on the Empower Hour. So, you guys, I'm going to introduce real quick. We've got two Bens. We knew one Ben wouldn't be enough, so we asked for two Bens, and we got them from Northwest Mutual. Um, we're joined today. We're going to be talking about financial freedom, financial independence. What does that mean for empowered women? And we've got two empowered men. We have Ben Gantt and Ben Graybar, both from Northwest Mutual. I want to welcome you and give you just a second to introduce yourself, and then we'll talk with our panelists. We've got Lori Finn back, Rose Caswick. We've got Elizabeth Hughes back with us today because we want to cover women through all developmental phases and everything that they might want to know about how to take care of themselves financially and prepare for their future. So welcome, Ben's.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right, who wants to go first? Let's talk to Ben Gantt. Tell me what you and Ben Graybar do and what your career is and just kind of give us an overview of
Yep.
what you do and how you help people.
So we do holistic financial planning. Usually people have experience working with multiple advisors. They might have a stockbroker, they've got insurance people, they've got a CPA, they've done some estate planning, but the opportunity is they're not all sitting around a table on a regular basis, focused on specific goals and circumstances. So efficiency gets left on the table. So
Yeah.
we do that really well, coordinate all the pieces.
And I'll say this, I'll throw this in. It's a bit of a unique situation. I'm a recent joiner of the Gantt Financial Group. And most of the time you've got investments folks and they want to talk about investing, and you got insurance folks, they want to talk about insurance.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very interesting firm because it is the number one largest insurance company that insures lives from the risk management perspective, rated higher than any other company in the United States with one peer, Microsoft. But on the other side of the coin, in the investments house, we're the fourth largest independent broker dealer. So we're not just a sidekick and we don't push you one way or the other.
Yeah.
And they've got a partnership with Ernst & Young to actually create some specified really great projections into the retirement income distribution space that are wonderful.
Okay. I'm going to talk to you about this now. Okay. Y'all are using weird words. Okay. Very boring sounding, very money, very not sexy words. So I want you to both try to commit to working on that, if you will, and try to make this interesting, because that's my job, is I have to make this an interesting show. And I can tell right now you're going to present me with some challenges. So in order to help us get ready to talk about money and numbers, we need a cocktail. Rose, where are you?
I am right here.
What do we have today? We're going to need it today.
Yes, this week we're celebrating the inauguration of Kamala Harris as the first female vice president of the United States.
Very
so
powered.
In her honor, we are going to honor her Jamaican roots, and this is a dark and stormy, which is dark rum and ginger beer. It's a simple mixed drink with a wedge of lime. It's one that I happen to like from before. It's not an experiment like the rest of them, but so for Kamala.
All right.
Here's to that.
I'm okay with that. It's all right. I'm not sure how I feel about ginger beer. I think I might just have my backup wine, but I appreciate the effort, and I certainly what we're commemorating with it. So that's wonderful. Seriously though, you two, we have all these people in the power plant, and they in the Empower Hour, and they have different. I'm 53. You guys handle some things for me. I'm in a different developmental phase. I have an adult child out of my house. I don't have to worry about paying for school tuition or, those sorts of things that a lot of people save up for, braces, cars, college, all those things associated with children. Elizabeth is a young college student starting right out. So there's a big space between her and me. So I always kind of went with whoever the place I worked for had 401k or a simple retirement, kind of maximize that. And then said, hopefully my house, I made a good real estate investment and that'll work out, and just didn't really have any kind of a strategy. What do you advise for people who are just starting out in the workforce?
Start early. Start carving something off month in, month out, because that makes a huge difference. You look back 6 months later, a year later, and it feels a little painful at first, but then you've got a pile of money that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah.
And then you pay off a bill, and you can crank it up a little bit. Makes
Yeah.
a huge difference. So compound interest, the example I give people quickly is, if a dollar doubles every year for 20 years, how much money do you have? And people usually miss this one, but the answer is over $1 million. So you've got $1 million, and people think they're cutting off the early years. They think they're cutting off the $2, the $4, the $6, or $8. Really, it's the 250, the 500, the million. Then I would say mitigate tax. So talk to someone about how to reduce taxes along the way, because if you apply that same scenario and you apply a 30% tax rate, you've got $40,000 at the end of the 20 years. You don't have $1 million. So start early and use strategies like your 401k plan. But if you're early on and your income's not extremely high, think about taxes and paying them now, biting the bullet now at a lower bracket, so that on a smaller number, so you don't have to pay tax at a higher rate later on a much bigger number. And we're at some of the lowest.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So if your employer offers a match for your contribution, max out the match, but
Yeah,
don't
100%.
any more than that.
Yeah.
See, the rest of that should go into something Roth, and ask them, do they have a Roth option within the 401k? Some will, some won't.
Got you. Do people have to be rich to hire people like you? Do you have to be somebody who's just got money, just trying to figure out where to stash it? Do you ever work with people in building and creating wealth?
Absolutely. Yeah, all day long. And that's something we take pride in, actually. A lot of the firms, they've got minimum account balances, 250, 500, 750 million. We'll work with people early on and help build a plan and grow with them. So you don't have to.
Is there, are there tools that you can recommend for people that they can get some sort of just almost like a primer or something, just so they could even come in and speak with you? Maybe there's some online resources available that have just kind of general, maybe financial hygiene or financial literacy, because you almost need to be at a certain level before you even engage with people who do what you all do. You need to have basic understanding.
Yeah, I think that holds people back sometimes, but we'll do a consultation with anyone. I mean, we really will. We'll have a conversation with someone and get them started in the right direction. So, and then so after our conversation, we leave them with homework, and they go, do a little research and provide us documents and information.
So there's multiple places to go with that. One piece is, what's your savings? What are your options for saving? The next piece is, what's your debt? What do you have there? And the third piece is risk management. What are the things that could get in the way of your plan and planning? And you really kind of have to cover all of that. Yeah. And really, I don't know of a resource out there that covers all of those. The nice part is, for your employers, many of those 401k plans will offer you a tool that says, if you're setting aside X number of dollars or % of your salary and you're going to retire at a certain age, you're a certain amount on target. Now, there's a fallacy with that. There's some wrong math that goes with that, but at least it gives you an overview. Makes you feel good about it, gives you a concept.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to our panelists and see what their questions might be. We put out a survey to the Empower Plant group, and this was the number one topic people wanted guests to talk about, which I kind of found surprising, because it is kind of hard talking to you guys. And how's that drink? Is that drink good? You wearing it now? Okay. But it is hard. It's hard to go talk to you guys, because you always use these words I don't understand and nothing makes any sense. But Lori, you have been through. You're a single mom. You've got children still at home. You've been through a divorce. What have been some of the financial struggles that you have coped with, overcome, and what kind of questions do you have for our guests today?
Well, first of all, I wish I had met with someone like the Bens before I ever got divorced, because I would have known what to ask, what to do, what to kind of set myself up. I thought I was doing the right thing by not challenging a lot of the things, that my ex-husband brought. I was so peaceful, and I was like, we'll just get a mediator and go on and so forth. He'll be fair. And there's no trauma. I wish I had gone and spoken to you and learned a little bit more. So that would be something. But now that I am starting over, and I want to know the best thing I can do to prepare for retirement? Should I invest in real estate? Should I do a 401k? What should I really do?
Yeah.
It really
Yeah, I would like for you to answer that. Like, if you do have advice that you give to people who are contemplating or coming out of a divorce, and then, again, what you said, how to plan for retirement, how to diversify, I guess.
So contemplating a divorce, I would tell you, go speak to someone, obviously, an attorney, but then also you need to speak to a financial advisor who does projections. A lot of them don't. A lot of them will sell you stock or sell you insurance, but they're not talking about overall planning.
Yeah.
So I've seen so many mistakes made with people who have gotten a divorce, and all of a sudden they didn't do the math right on the insurance. I had a pension plan. The attorney was actually giving the client bad advice on the amount of pension that she should take. It was about half of what she was entitled to. So you got to have somebody do the math and run those numbers if they're contemplating. If they're coming out of divorce, same deal. I mean, you need a plan. You need to understand what your situation is, what your goals are, what resources are available, and then we can help optimize.
Yeah.
And the last question was, what should you be investing in? I mean, that again is customized, but I'll tell you, real estate is, you can hit and miss there. So, and it can be a lot more expensive than people think.
Right.
So that's a bit risky. I think the basics are, there are basics that you should do. Pay down high interest debt first. We can speak
variable debt.
We can speak to that. You should have some sort of an emergency fund built up. 3 to 6 months is ideal while you're working, and then you should start, if possible, some sort of savings plan. If your employer is going to match and help with you on that, like you said, go up to the match and then look at other options. If you can do Roth IRA, and people who make more than the limits can actually put money in Roth, they just don't realize it. There are ways to backdoor that.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was capped off pretty hard, at a certain amount of income or something.
There's ways to get money in Roth without that. We can get into it, but it's a little technical, but you can do it really easy.
Sounds like I need to come see you.
Yeah, I mean, it's safe. Get a budget, right? Get a budget done, and then you figure out what your discretionary income is, and then start saving money. Mutual funds are the best way to do it. I would try to pick stock. I'd stay away from Bitcoin. I would not try to do real estate at first.
Okay.
But there's the basics.
Thank you.
Yeah. Rose, I wanted to hear from you because you are a young professional. What are your thoughts when you think of financial planning and investing prudently for your future?
Yeah, well, for me, I think the only thing I really need to think about right now is retirement income, because I'm single. I don't have kids. I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to have kids. Those are not expenses that I'm going to incur. I don't own a home. I don't have a mortgage. I probably will at some point, but I kind of think home ownership is a scam. So those are not things that I need to particularly worry about. But I need to know or think about, I have investments, but how to maximize those investments and how to get away from my sort of dragonish tendencies of like, I have all this money in savings, I'll be set for, however much time, because right now there's pretty much no financial storm I can't weather. Maybe weather, but like if something bad happened right now, whatever it was, I would be set. But I need to figure out how to trade off that sense of security against future security.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that with money, is they know what they need to feel comfortable. But what was that? Somebody famous said, you nobody ever saved their way into wealth. You've got to spend wisely or invest, in this case, I would suppose wisely, because you need your money to grow for you, not just be there, in case you have a bad incident. And it's hard to know how to make it grow well. Now, one thing I do is I try to have a diversity. Like, I don't have all investments with one, broker house or one person. That just seems kind of prudent. I don't have all my money in one bank. Just seems like a smart thing to do. Do you have any specific examples, Ben's 1 and 2? I don't know. I've got to come up with a better name. I'm not liking the Benz. I'm thinking the Benz, like whenever you come up with
with the Benz. I don't know.
The Benz.
OB.
They're the
Moving for
Benjis.
other Ben here.
The Ben.
I did feel saying
Yeah. What do you have any stories? Anything like things that you were able to really help a woman who was just kind of confused, or maybe she's, you know,
I think
young or divorced or whatever? What you got any stories?
I think you hit on a few things that are important. Sitting on money and thinking you're okay is a bit of a problem potentially, because I meet with people. We do a lot of income distribution planning, so people in their 60s who are trying to unwind their assets, and what we find is they don't always have enough money to do what they want to do because they didn't plan ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lot more difficult to generate income from assets today than it was in the 80s. And there's several reasons for that. People are living longer.
Mm-hmm.
Get stats on that. They're living a lot longer.
Yeah, you can live 30 years after you retire nowadays. Easy. If you retire at 60 or so.
Easy.
Yeah.
And information travels so fast now. So you can make a trade driving down the highway at 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And you've got all these people doing that. They don't have a clue what they're doing.
I know.
So what they do is they affect volatility.
Yeah.
And while you're young and working, it doesn't matter, because as long as you don't sell, like in March when we had a big drop, if you didn't sell, you were fine. But if you're retired and you're living on that money and you're trying to generate, you run out of money real fast. It's a snowball effect. We could show you examples. It's not pretty. So the dilemma that exists, and the one that somebody was talking about was, if you got the money in savings and cash, you're actually losing purchasing power because of inflation. So it will cut your purchasing power in half over a 15 to 20 year period. So your 50,000 in cash feels like 25 in 15 years. And so the cash and CDs and bonds, safe investments, we see that all the time. People are allocated the wrong way in their 401k plans.
Yeah.
They're not meant to fight inflation. They're meant to be protection vehicles. So equities, investment, stocks, right, are meant to be inflation fighters. So distribution rates are different. So basically you can take easy math, you take your goal, okay? And if you got to factor in inflation, but if you divide it by a certain distribution rate, tell you how much money you need to have. And a 3% distribution rate is a much safer number now. It used to be 5%. So what that means is 30,000 per million, today's dollars, right, is a safe number, which is a much bigger number than people realize, right? So I would tell you want that money working for you, want compound interest working for you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on like once your expenses, are covered, on a percentage to put into those types of growth investments versus into savings? Or if once you get to you've got your 6-month cushion or whatever, you can go wild on putting the rest into investing?
It really depends on the situation, but 20% is close, 20%. 20 to 25 if you want to cover college, stuff like that for kids. Yeah.
Told mine to work hard and either get a scholarship or just work 40 hours a week like I did and pay and save up for each semester.
Yeah.
You're on your own, bitches.
And it's an interesting question too, because you have kids that can get college loans themselves at really discounted rates. You go to retire and you can't say to the bank, give me a long-term loan at 2 or 3% unsecured, please.
Right.
So you really must focus on yourself.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And you know what I found when I was in law school, I went later. And so I was about 15 years older than my cohorts. But I saw these kids in law school living off a credit card, so to speak, because it was, everything was debt that they were incurring. And they were living like they were already lawyers. There was no dues paying. There was no suffering. And so these kids get out of school and they got $200,000 in loans. I'm like, that's a house that you got to pay off before you could buy a house. So I think it's really important that people, especially young people, learn how to use credit and understand debt well. Elizabeth, do you have any thoughts or any questions? Because you are a college student, although she's one of these brainiacs who already had a 2-year degree when she graduated high school. So she's way ahead of the curve on that. But still, college costs money. So what are your thoughts on getting, starting up, finishing your education? Because you're talking about graduate school, law school also. What are your thoughts about finances?
So I just recently started playing around with the stock market. Just not much money, just a little bit to try and kind of get a feel for it and understand like what's going on. But I want to know what I can do now. I've thought about Roth IRAs and I'm trying to figure out where's the best spot to open a Roth IRA, interest rates, what's the highest interest rate I can get, things like that. I guess kind of like shopping around.
Yeah.
But what's the best thing I can do for myself right now in order to build up a savings account for law school or master's degree? And then also be preparing myself for, retirement. I'm 19 years old, but you can never be too young to start thinking for the future, especially, if I can retire at 55, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
And, have millions of dollars.
Because you'll be bored.
Yeah.
Because you'll be bored. But one of the good things about having money, even if you don't really need it, Rose and Elizabeth, sometimes I've found this in my life, sometimes opportunities come along. And I wouldn't be able to take them if I didn't have the cash or some liquidity to be able to kind of make these arbitrage, profits here and there. So what is your response to Elizabeth, guys?
I would say we use a strategy called time-weighted asset allocation. All it means is you want to align the investment allocation, that just means if it's aggressive and risky or if it's safe. You want to align that with the time frame so that's predictable, right? There's never been a 15-year period in the history of the market that's lost money. There have been plenty of one-year periods, like every single year, as a matter of fact. The S&P has been negative at some point over the last 40 years. Mm-hmm. It's only finished negative 9 times, right? So you got to put some thought into that, how it's allocated. So the short-term goals, the additional school, that type of thing is going to be very, very short-term investments, cash, CDs, maybe some short-term bonds. The other stuff, you need to identify the goal and then back into, how much you need to save to hit the goal, factor in inflation and taxes and all those things. But save as much as you can is probably the answer. And I would do Roth IRA. And as far as the best place to do that, it depends on if you want to do it on your own or not. People sometimes want to do it on their own. They enjoy that type of thing. You can do, E-Trade, Charles Schwab, that type of thing. You can set up an account and not pay anybody anything. We charge a little bit of money to do it, but we would give you an advice.
You're probably a little better at it.
Some experience.
It's like those people who go to LegalZoom and those people who go to lawyers. Totally different outcomes. I had some questions.
Throw that out there, Dana.
What now?
There's different classifications. Okay. There's play money, the Vegas money, the weekend money that maybe you just want to experiment with. And then there's the safe money that you want to know where it's going to be more predictably. Right. And that might be a different bucket. So different ways to address the same question.
I got you. I guess I have a question about what do you do whenever you are going to have to take, well, first of all, do you think it's a good thing to buy long-term care insurance? And what if I want to make sure somebody can care for me, or I can be cared for the way I want to. If I become ill, I don't want to be a burden to my daughter. I want to make sure, I can have whatever I want. Or what if I have parents, my parents, not only am I raising my kids, now I got to take care of my older parents too. How do you handle things like that in the fairness? Like how much of it should I be responsible for? How much should I expect my parents to contribute to their own care? Long-term care policies. What are your thoughts on that? I imagine that comes up more than I probably realize.
Yeah, you threw a lot of things out there, so
I usually do.
Yeah. So a few stats, right? So 70% of people over age 65 need care. All right, 70%. It's a big number. 70% of caregivers are 75% of caregivers are women, right? 55%.
Yeah.
Surprise.
It's a big deal. Yeah.
Grunt work falls on a woman. What? That's so new.
No, it's true. It's true. So 55% of caregivers are providing more than 6 hours of care a day.
That's crazy.
58% of female caregivers reported their careers were impacted by their caregiving. So my grandmother was in a nursing home, right? Well, she lived with us for several years. My mom took care of her for years. It's $1 million claim.
Yeah.
When you say $1 million, though, that's a net of tax million. You know? So you have to liquidate something, pay tax on it to pay those people.
Yeah.
Long-term care insurance is a tax-free benefit.
Okay.
And if you have a business, you can actually tax deduct that premium.
Hmm.
There's tax incentives for long-term care insurance.
Yeah.
So I would tell you, my mother actually lost her job because she was spending so much time caring for me. And that's what happens all the time.
Yeah.
So, I think it's based on the plan. If you can build in the budget, we do that for people. We'll run projections and say, look, here's your risk. You've got one risk here. It looks like you're able to accomplish your goals. If you have this problem, depends on how big it is, you might not, right? And we'll build in the premium and say the premium might cost you a little bit, but big mistake, little mistake, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pay the premium, don't have an issue. Don't pay the premium due, right? So just do the math for people is what we do. But I think it's a critical piece. It's one of the 6 main risks of retirement, for sure.
The long-term care.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. See, I wondered about it because for years they used to offer something called cancer insurance. It's like a augmented policy. But then I would hear things like, well, people rarely die of cancer. They usually die of, what's treating the cancer or a complication of the side effects of treating the cancer. And then the policy wouldn't pay because you didn't die of cancer per se. So I'm thinking, well, is it another one of those little gotcha things where there's all kind of ins and outs? But it sounds to me like you're saying long-term insurance is a good product.
Long-term care insurance is a good product. There are cancer policies. That is a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
Aflac has a great cancer policy.
Uh-huh.
But that can be an issue. Long-term care is much more broad, right?
Because I know so many people in our generation, y'all are younger than me or about my age, I think, but gosh, everybody in our generation is having to deal with the parents and their kids. I mean, I know a lot of people got both of them in the house at the same time. I don't know how they do it.
It provides care in home too. That's a missing. So 80% of the care is given at home, and long-term care insurance will pay for that.
And I bet you anything after this COVID scare, there's going to be a whole lot more people making sure they have the resources to stay in their own homes. Because if you were in one of those and kind of got stuck there during COVID, you'd be like, oh, go ahead, Ben, Ben on the right.
So a couple of stories at our office.
Yeah.
And one of them is you have someone that was approaching retirement, ended up in a divorce situation, didn't have kids, and they have a certain amount of assets that are going to get them through retirement at the predicted wanted lifestyle, unless a long-term care claim affects them, and then they're off rail. And so now it becomes a question of what options there are. The other one, though, a young friend of mine and his wife's mother, she had a health incident hit her in her late 50s. And so she was still thinking, I've got a decade to maybe go before I retire. She blew through the savings she had, and she's now terminal. And so she's in another town because that's who took Medicaid because she blew through her assets. So now her family in COVID has to go drive an hour because she didn't have enough assets to cover the cost of dealing with it. So this just, we lay out the potential issues, and then we look at the asset and the options, and then obviously you guys have to make a decision as to where your comfort level is and how to address them.
Yeah. Something else like I would like help with, because I have these assets and I have one little error in this whole world. And I don't want to dump a very complex, complicated financial scheme on a 20-something-year-old who's already dealing with grief of having lost her fabulous mother. So what do you recommend for people who, people like me, just kind of blew up and I'm just still acting like I'm, a college kid. I need to act like a grown up.
Yeah, not everybody is willing to be as transparent as you. So, well, I'm just saying for as far as sharing, with children and that type of thing.
Yeah, a lot of people tell me, they're like, I tell my kids, you're not getting anything. Don't you plan on anything? I'm like, I can't tell her that. She'll go, what are you spending it on? What are you doing?
Mother,
she knows the kids will be up.
She's in all the pictures. I see her in all the pictures.
Right.
So intergenerational planning is something we do a lot of. So I'll have conference calls with our clients who are older, and they have children, adult children. We'll set up a conference call and talk about the planning we do and how it's going to, because it absolutely has an impact on the children, one way or another. Could be positive, could be negative. And the assets that you leave make a huge difference also. That's what people don't realize. So in looking at what assets you want to spend down and what assets you want to leave, like the Secure Act now changed things for people. So if you leave 401k money or IRA money to the next generation, it's a 10-year force out, meaning
say what that means. Don't be using weird words.
It means you got to liquidate that account in 10 years. And so
so if I die and I leave 401k or simple retirements, it's the same?
Correct, same deal.
Okay, some sort of a government, employer helped type product. So they'll have to spend it within 10 years?
Well, that's the rule now, but there are other scenarios where it has to be in
How many young people do you leave money to who have a problem spending quickly?
Well, the problem is the tax. The problem's the tax.
No problem spending, that's for sure.
But if they're earning income, right, then that is on top of it. So the bottom line is and we're at low
because it was
tax
my
rate.
income tax deferred. Somebody's gonna have to pay something on it.
Correct.
I tax deferred the money into it, right?
And you can stretch it out while you're alive, but otherwise it's going to get crammed out of there, and a lot of tax is going to go out the door.
Okay.
So you can do things to avoid that.
I'll tell you something else that's interesting.
Yep.
A lot of people, I've got two things that have to do with married women. I know a lot of women who work for their professional husbands. They may manage their office. They may be their paralegal, their nurse, or whatever. They work for, and as far as law firms go, law firms can only be owned by lawyers. And so, for easy purposes, Jimmy Fasig and I own this law firm. And if one of us, had to get divorced, then that would be between them and their divorce as to what portion of that individual share of the law firm the spouse would be entitled to. But like in a medical practice, that may be a little bit different. But I see so many people who, to avoid taxes, they don't take a salary.
Right.
So they can't demonstrate any kind of income whenever they try to apply for a loan or buy a house or any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
They look like they have been out of the workforce. And then when you look at, well, do they own a part of that practice? Well, a lot of those people in sole practitioner firms, they spend all the money, run everything through the firm. So they're paying very little, income tax on a very small looking salary. So then you go to divorce this person, they're like, oh, he only makes $150,000 a year.
Yeah.
So you can't really get alimony because he can't demonstrate an ability to pay it. It's just a lot of these little games people play to try to get around taxes. They'll really bite you in the rear end whenever you need to, do things on the up and up. Do you ever see that happen? People come in and they go, well, don't I get half of his practice? Where's my money?
Right. So interesting. Yeah, we do see that. And, the way that works is it is half, but the way a business is valued is as if, for example, my business, it would be valued as if I was no longer in the firm, or I sold it that day, but I did not have a non-compete. I didn't have a non-compete, and so there's no value there really. So you really
start another firm somewhere else.
Yeah. Nobody would pay me anything for that.
Yeah.
You have to do the math ahead of time. I mean, you really should do your due diligence ahead of time to look at that. But you're right, and I would tell you, paying yourself salary, they need to pay the salary so you bump up Social Security benefits. You can qualify. You can put money away into qualified plans. That affects a lot of things. That they just have planned.
They're not maximizing it. They're not getting the most that they can out of it. Just as from an intent to just not pay taxes, they're not really taking advantage of a lot of things that they could do to shore up their financial future, I would think. Let's see, what's another one I was thinking about? Just kind of practical issues that go on. Let's see, anything else? What comes up that you deal with women? I'm kind of talking about women in particular when they come to you. What issues do you see with them?
Well, let's address a specific period of time.
Sure.
So let's say you've got somebody that maybe their relationship isn't going the way they want it to, and they want to sort of build some defensive walls and protect themselves. So
this sounds sneaky. I like it.
Yeah. I'm grabbing my notes on this one. I got sent something by somebody on this.
We're being diligent here.
Yeah, we're doing prudent is what we're being, not sneaky.
So number one, if there's any kind of borrow at the bank, there's a person, and it's going to require the spouse be on there most of the time. Get a copy, keep it. Number two, you certainly want to get copies of tax returns on both parties and keep it. Now, sometimes you're filing separately. You still want to try to capture that because it'll give you an idea of what the deductions are. So maybe you can recapture those. Hey, let's face it, we all drive cars. It's just mine's free because I pay for it to work and not separately. So I can't afford to buy you one separately, right? And then the little concept of titling of accounts. Are you on the accounts or not? Are you payable upon death or in trust for in case something happens to that person? If you are going to the grocery store, to the Walmart Publix, do you have the ability to maybe buy a small gift card that doesn't have a fee annually that erodes the value and you can set aside? Do you have a private account yourself that maybe it's not titled online, just so you've got something for you in case something like that happens?
So many people do not. And then they'll go through a divorce and they'll find out that their spouse had all that stuff. And they're like, what the heck, man? But yes, women are terrible about that. They just don't protect themselves. They just kind of go through life with like, I trust him. He's taking care of me. This will be okay. Now, don't misunderstand me. That could happen to men too, but it just usually the woman is not the higher income earner and she is the one who is vulnerable.
I see that. I see all the time women not wanting to sit in the meetings and letting the man just handle the plan.
Oh, I know.
It's crazy. And they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So they should involve themselves in those meetings, at least sit there, even if they're bored.
And you have to understand your own credit, because I had a deal literally Friday. I'm talking to somebody who says, I'm getting divorced. My wife needs to buy a house. She's going to get something in the settlement, but she has no credit because I applied for everything.
Yeah.
And so it's important to monitor and have your own credit so that if then there becomes an award of a house or you need to go have a house bought for you, it's not controlled by the other party or you're still involved with them when you're trying to actually separate.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that you can have no credit. They think you have good or bad credit. They don't understand there's a concept of having no credit. We had this problem, like some people own their homes, like they don't have mortgages on them. They pay cash for their vehicles. A lot of times, even though they are a very sound, prudent financial person, they don't have any like footprint or any thumbprint. It's like you're not. So you have to use credit to build credit, but you have to use it wisely. What are your recommendations for people? Because what I understood when I was growing up, I was born in '67, raised in the 70s, graduated '85, that kind of context. It was like, okay, if you ever had a bad ding on your credit, it was going to be on it 7 years. If you declared bankruptcy, that was like a 10-year thing. There was just kind of like these little credit myths that I had that I understand now are different because people can improve their credit scores within months, within days, cycles sometimes. I think they maybe look at it a little differently now, but somebody like Elizabeth, our college student here, who's our marketing assistant, how do you tell them to use credit from very young ages?
The first thing is, if in fact you have student loans, they can affect you if you have a payment due and don't pay them. So you can't just ignore that and think it'll go away. And when we were opening up for young people accounts and they said, I had a $15, $20 copay for medical and I never paid it. Now it's a collection on the account. It's a negative. Those little things will hit you, but there's value in getting credit. So to build credit, it's probably easiest to get a store credit card, highest interest. You never want to owe a balance over time, but to get it, and then you can maybe get the gas card where you're putting a tank of gas on, but pay the doggone thing in full. And then you can have a regular credit card from a traditional bank. And that's going to be the thing that gives you longevity and credit history. Certainly cars are a great thing to be on, but the issue becomes, let's say that you're married and the spouse is the one driving that transaction. And they say, well, we'll just apply and I give you my info. You might want to be on that. And you might want to consider separate accounts and say, I'm going to write the check for that. So that when you go to the bank and say, I need to buy a car on my own, I need to get a house on my own, you can show it may have been a joint loan, but I can show you the checks that I wrote to pay for that. So the credit history is in fact mine.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, Elizabeth.
What I want to know specifically about is I'm in school right now and I'm not taking out any student loans. So is it a good idea for me to take out student loans or to continue paying with the cash that I have saved up?
Yeah, that's a great question. When do you use your money and when do you use somebody else's?
Thank you.
Because
That's something we need to.
I'm trying not to get any student loans because I don't want to have to pay any debt back in case something does just so happen to go wrong. But if it's better for me to have the loans so I can have, credit history, is that something I should know? Okay.
That's a great question. That's a great question, Benz.
It's a very good question. Yeah, and that applies to other mistakes we see people making also. So I'm gonna let go ahead.
So if you're in college, chances are you're starting to get credit card offers in the mail. And although you don't want to,
that's it.
well, and so the rule of thumb is 3 credit accounts, one of them with a small balance paid in full, never owe more than 1/3 of the available credit on whatever that account is.
That matters.
And that will give you the best credit rating, and then keep open whatever that account is. So you want to try to open one that does not have an annual fee, so it doesn't cost you something to keep that long credit history, because that's what drives up your score.
Yeah, and I had been told ages ago, never borrow money to purchase a depreciating asset. Like don't charge and keep a balance for things like entertainment or food, things that you consume. You would not want to pay cash for a vehicle, that's going to depreciate. You want to borrow somebody else's money at as low interest as you can, because you might get out of that thing in 2 years, and then you wouldn't have given up all your money for this depreciating asset that now is worth half of that 2 years later. So I was kind of taught those sorts of things. Obviously, you probably want to finance real estate because there's tax advantages to it. Like you said, you may be able to take the interest deduction or something. But do you have a rule of thumb when you tell people when to charge, when to not charge?
Borrow the least expensive dollar you can borrow.
Always, yeah.
And do a fixed rate whenever possible when the rates are cheap.
Yeah.
And stretch out that rate lock as long as possible.
Yeah.
So right now, and Ben said it earlier, there's never been a period in history, 1926 to present, when if you took the return in the stock market for a 15-year period, any 15 years from 1926 to now, where it wasn't a positive rate of return. So people are asking us, should I buy a home? And will I do well or not? Well, homes, if I bought a home 15 years ago, does it cost more or cost less than if I went to go buy the same home today? And if I can buy that home at a 2 point something or 3% rate of interest over any 15 or 30-year period, is there any time period where I didn't earn at least 3% or more for having invested those dollars?
Yeah.
And, think through it. Now, there's comfort level things and there's, all these ancillary effective things, but those are the basic generic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what do you recommend in terms of just a financial literacy? Like, again, there's so many people. It could be somebody Elizabeth's age because, she's young. But some kids her age, their parents taught them all this, they know. And then you've got some women my age whose husbands die or they get divorced and they don't know even how to set up a checking account. Are there online tutorials? Is that something you all offer? Where should someone go when they just are clueless?
Unfortunately, I would tell you, the sad part is we meet with people all the time, all week long, that actually have advisors that don't have good plans. So that's the sad part.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, but I don't know that there's any place you can go,
Well, let me ask you this. Are you a fiduciary?
Yeah. When we're managing money, we are.
Yeah. And tell people what that means. Because there's a distinction, because I think you're not every financial planner is a fiduciary.
Everything that's done is in your best interest at all times.
Yeah.
There can be no conflicts of interest that aren't disclosed, at least. Some of them you can avoid. And then the way I say it is we've got to be able to stand up in front of a judge and prove that every decision we make is in your best interest. So if there's an option for us to get the same type of investment account with a similar return and goal and all that and do it cheaper, we have to do that.
You have to do that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Here. There are all different types of people that call themselves financial advisors, and they don't all have the same types of tools, number of tools, classification of tools. And so if you only got one tool, the saying is, when all you've got's a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail.
Sure does.
So
Yeah.
it might be good to have more than one conversation to where reality is.
Yeah. And one of the things I've done that Ben Gantt helped me set up years back, when I decided instead of giving that sum of money to the Florida Democratic Party, I was going to give it to me. So I just reached, I said, here, there's a sum of money, make something happen with that every month, because they're not performing for me and I'm going to give you the opportunity to do that. So we've been doing it, but I laugh, but it is funny because it is after tax dollars for me. And so it is kind of a quasi, it's got an insurance benefit to it, but it's also, an investment, and it is my money.
Yep.
It is my money. So if the worst comes to worst and I needed that money, I could get it without, tax consequences, because I have already paid the taxes on it. So I think people need to be open and not think that because you've got a tight budget, there's no room for savings, or there's no room to maybe reconfigure some things to free up some money with some tax, considerations. There's a lot of times where I go, oh, if I do that, I free up some money because I've changed my tax obligation. So I know a lot of it, maybe talk to you, maybe talk to CPA, maybe talk to lawyers. What do you guys do for fun? Because I always look at you and I think you're deeply uninteresting. Everything you talk about bores me. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm straight up saying, I don't understand what you say. I don't ever understand what you say. And I always go there going, I trust him.
We drink.
My money performs with him, but I don't know what he just said. But I do wonder if he has any fun at all. So let's start with Ben Gantt. What do you do for actual fun?
I like to have drinks. I drink.
I like a cocktail.
Yeah, I go happy hours. I coach. I play flag football still. So.
And you have a passel of children.
I do.
You're prolific.
I'm pretty sure there's 5. So yeah.
At last count.
Yeah.
So yeah. So we coach. I coach a ton of their sports.
Yeah.
So I don't have a ton of time for other stuff.
And your wife is she's just unstoppable. She's just a force. I dig her to the max. She's awesome. Plus, I think she could take you in like a mano combat situation. I've seen her.
I would like to see
her
this.
workouts. No, I've seen her workouts. Have you, Rose?
Mm-mm.
I think my money's on Bambi. Ben Graybar, do you have any fun ever?
I also coach my kid in I-9, which is a ton of fun. But I changed my virtual background to my charitable fun fundraising event, where August 28th, we're running the Civic Center, and we're hoping to have over 70 breweries again this year. And we have a couple thousand people that do a beer tasting, and we give all the money away to local nonprofits, and it's a heck of a fun time. So I'm definitely in the beer snob category, although Rose knocked out her park with today's drink.
Yeah, ginger beer. Are you still doing your Ironman or your Tough Mudders or whatever you were doing?
Yeah, we did F3 this morning, and we have a Tallahassee first quarter Go Ruck event coming up, which is co-ed. So anybody there wants to come out and join us, we put some weights on our back and we go run around with it.
Yeah, that sounds like something I never want to be involved in. But I do love that my financial planners are fit, because I think that suggests discipline. I think that suggests that they're serious people. So I like a fit financial planner. I like that. Let's go around to our panel before we close and see if there's any more parting questions before we leave, or if there's any more, anybody else want to insult them? Because I've done that. Rose, what are your thoughts today?
I think this has been very productive. I guess my question would be if you have any advice on how to approach your parents about those types of conversations, because mine, I think they're well off, but we don't, set for retirement basically, but we don't have those in-depth kind of conversations. I don't go with them to meet with their broker. I assume, and I don't have any reason to think they're lying to me, but is there any, way that, or ideas that you have about how to talk about what their plan actually is and how to supplement it if I have to?
Yeah.
I've got a thought for you there. So so what I would do there, I kind of backdoor into that one. That one's a difficult one.
Yeah.
So what I'll usually say to someone like you, if I'm in front of you talking to you, I guess I would say your parents must have a planner, and I'm sure they've introduced him to you because they're
Yeah.
happy with him, but they usually haven't, is the reality, right? And so, so I would say, so what people like you will normally do is say, hey, mom, dad, I'm meeting with a financial planner and I sure would like you to vet them, right? And at least make sure I'm making good decisions. Would you mind if I conference you in on a call? Okay. And then when we get them in, we share concepts and strategies that they typically haven't dealt with yet.
It's very sneaky. I like that.
Yeah, thank you.
We like a sneaky planner.
I like people who tell you sneaky things to do with your parents. I trust that.
There are. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you this, though. This is very serious. I know of a person whose parents were very prudent, very financially set, but when the early stages of dementia, Alzheimer, whatever you want to call that, came in, one of the things the father did was he would throw away money or make kind of weird transfers and stuff. Because, it's not like a brick wall. Like all of a sudden you're competent one day and tomorrow you're not competent clearly. There's a,
decline.
Yeah, there's a decline. And so, I wonder what a lot of people are probably like, I need to start monitoring my parents, money and their transactions and stuff like that. Do you ever have that kind of issue? Because I worry about this because it happens a lot as a lawyer. People will say, I think I need to take over my parents' affairs or whatever. But if the parents are not well enough to give consent to that, or if they've already gone to the point where they're not well enough to give consent or not give consent, then you got a whole go to a court issue.
That's right.
It'd be nice to avoid things like that on the front end.
It would be nice. You're right. So we've got a document we can share with you, and you send it to your people here. It's a guide for the future. And so it's an electronic version. I mean, it outlines all the different accounts. The problem is, they might not be open-minded to that. They haven't done planning in the past. They're, keeping it tight. So that other thing I mentioned sometimes works. It gets them to open their minds.
Yeah. How do people reach you? What's your contact information? We'll put something up on the Empower Plan, but just go ahead and tell us while we're all together how to reach you.
Phone, email. It's let's see. So
We just moved opposite.
Yeah, we did.
Where'd you move?
Right around the corner, right behind Glory Days now. So that white building.
Okay, yeah. Just in the same neighborhood.
Yeah, right there. So email, website, bengantt.com, 2 T's, or
Gantt@nm.com.
yeah, ben.gantt@nm.com is the email, or you can call 222-2124.
Okay. We'll put it all out there. Lori, what about you? What are your closing thoughts and maybe some questions today?
Well, they inspired me to ask a question. Actually, Rose, what she brought up. I have parents who don't have any money. No, nothing. They're living on what is left of my dad's retirement from the city. And then, they'll have Medicaid and stuff like that at some point. But I take care of them. My brother and sister live elsewhere. I take care of them. What is something that are there any resources to help someone like me? Is there, I would be happy to pay for an insurance or something.
Yeah.
What could I look into?
You got to quantify what that potential risk or exposure is. One of the questions we always do cover is the question to ask your parents. My financial planner advised me to ask you if there's going to be an inheritance/tax event that we need to plan for, or if I need to plan on helping or assisting, especially with the caretaking, especially if you're female, because it's often looked on to them to be the primary caregiver, especially the sibling that lives closest to your parents. So I'm just trying to be prudent and prepare for whatever it is you might need me to do. And so how can we have that conversation? What can we do? And so we'll have that talk. We can quantify what those exposures are.
That's good.
That is such a huge thing. That affects people more and more and more. Like when I was growing up, my grandmother did that. My grandmother would stay at home, and if there was anybody in the family who ever needed anything, my grandmother took care of them, whatever. But, when's the last time? My mother worked her whole career. She wasn't ever that kind of grandma. She had to work until retirement. So, the way we used to deal with taking care of people in the family, that just doesn't work anymore. People got to have income. And with this business of working from home, you got kids at home with COVID, you got elderly people trying to keep them apart. Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. I feel so much for the people who are dealing with that. Elizabeth, what are your final thoughts today?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you both for coming
Yeah.
on because I learned a lot today. There's words that I definitely need to look up and some things I'm like, what exactly does that mean? But I'm glad because learning experience can never be a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I do have one more additional question. I mentioned that I had started, put a little bit of money towards stocks, and I have two friends in specific. They're also putting some money into stocks. Is that something that you would tell college students to do? How do you tell us to do a research the best? Is there a website that we can go to research these things? Because we're just kind of Googling it. We're saying, that sounds kind of good. Let's put $50 here. So what's the best way for us to go about handling the stock market? Because to so many young people, the stock market is like this big giant. You think, oh my goodness, I can't, start doing anything with the stock market unless my parents did it, or unless I'm on Wall Street, or, things like that. So with college students, is that something that you recommend us do? And if so, how do you recommend us get into that?
Right.
No, I don't recommend that unless you are. I mean, it's like going to Vegas. You got to get lucky. It's lucky money. I would start saving now, compound interest.
So with the Roth IRA and savings accounts,
index funds, diversification, way less risk.
Yeah.
And we know that's extremely predictable. So the other stuff, you get lucky. Maybe.
Hey, I just heard today somebody's doing Bitcoin. Some mainstream person is doing Bitcoin. What was that? What's that about?
Yeah, BlackRock.
BlackRock. What's going on there?
So I was listening to NPR a week ago, and I think it was an FSU professor, and he said the problem with Bitcoin is you can't spend it. You can buy it, but you can't spend it.
Who takes it?
But there are now more mainstream places that are starting to. I'm scared of it because I lecture at FSU on cybersecurity to the Brand Institute, and it is the currency of bad guys. It's untraceable.
Yeah, well, it's you're not using banks. It's not protected. It's kind of like Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Somebody puts a gun to your head and says, "Give me your password." You lose your Bitcoin. Nobody
ransomware paying Bitcoin. Exactly, and so the problem is you can log onto your PayPal app or a couple others, but where can you spend it on a regular basis to divest of it? That you've asked I'll call that Vegas money. If you want to go play with that, if you want to gamble it and you don't worry if you win it or lose it, that's fine. Play that. That's good. But for the dollars that you have a purpose for, then back to the mutual fund world, and let's be safer and let the pros do the calls.
Well, if you got some play money, I'm going to buy a little bit.
See what happens.
I mean, yeah.
I don't know how many women, even if they have it, would consider it play money. Women have not had money that long. We're not that comfortable with calling it play money. We want all of it, and we want all of it to perform. I think I speak for a lot of our viewers when I say that. I don't want to risk anything. I don't have to.
Yeah.
The biggest thing here today for me is be safe. Everything you do, be safe. And then if you get to a point where you got play money and you can do things, do that. But first of all, go with the safe options. Yeah.
Can I
think so. And you have to go ahead, Ben.
Well, I just would say we see people playing it too safe a lot. So you can be conservatively aggressive. Aggressive and beat inflation. So have a plan is what I would try to take away. I mean, go meet with somebody and have a plan to help you meet your goals in the most efficient way possible. That's what I'm saying.
And revisit the plan and tweak the plan. It's not set it and forget it.
That's
being safe, something that you see more with women. They're less willing to take those risks. So you can end up underperforming.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
Well, and to touch on a point that Dana raised earlier, you got to understand what the whole big picture is. And so there's value in diversification in spreading your risk, but you also have to understand the risk of correlation, where you think you've got different people doing things for you, but they're all doing the same thing. And so you're really hyper correlated in the same risk. Maybe you don't know about it. So understanding the big picture is very important.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the big takeaway then is go talk to a good planner.
Yeah.
For a few.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you guys for being here. You're the first you hold a position of honor. You're the first men who have ever been guests on the Empower Hour. So we'll get you some
Thank you.
T-shirts made up with that on it.
10 guests.
I was the first dude. Yeah, we are not male haters. We actually love all our empowered men. We love everybody here who can help us grow to be more empowered women and have control of our money. Because to me, that's the real thing that distinguishes an empowered woman is someone who has agency, autonomy, who has decision making and freedom to do the things that she wants to do to make sure she has the best life she could possibly have. And you can't do that if you're trusting your dad, your husband, or somebody else with your money. You've got to be responsible for it. So thank you so much again, Ben Gantt and Ben Graybar of Gantt Financial Services. Is that the right way to put it? With Northwestern Mutual. I love these guys. I've known them both. They've taken care of us and the firm and me and Jimmy personally for many, many years. I trust them explicitly, implicitly, whatever implicit I'm supposed to. So anyway, thank you for coming. I love your background. That made me feel like I'm not going to get rained on and be cold all day tomorrow, which I know is not true. I want to thank Rose again for the drink, which was almost palatable. I want to thank Lori for coming in because she has not felt wonderful. And I always want to thank Elizabeth because I like to hear what the young people are thinking of what matters to them. So thank you all. And we will come back again next Thursday at 4:30 for another live edition of the Empower Plant or the Empower Hour by the Empower Plant. So
Thank you.
good night, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.